Hello, everybody. In this week's Casually Criterion episode, we're going to review Citizen Kane, spine number 1104. But before that, we're going to talk a little bit about Alien Romulus, and then maybe a little bit about Prometheus and Alien Covenant on the back end as well. So join us.
Casual Cinecast powered by Cinelinx, the show where we talk about the TV and movies we've been watching, as well as do a deep dive review of a current movie or a classic film from the Criterion Collection as voted on by the listener via X/Twitter. This is one of those Criterion episodes, which we like to call Casually Criterion episodes. The film that won our last listener poll on films from the 1940s was Citizen Kane, spine number 1104. My name is Justin, and with me as always is Mike. And Mike, this is a very special episode. Do you know why?
I don't.
It's Citizen Kane related. I'll give you a hint.
I don't know.
No?
Okay. I win the poll again?
No, that's not special. That happens almost every week.
Okay.
No, actually, just because this is the namesake of where our News on the March segment comes from.
Oh, I was going to comment on that later.
Oh, were you? But then I spoiled it.
Yeah. I was going to say, right after the bumper happened, I was going to say, and you heard right there. Well, anyway, it would have been great. It would have been great.
I mean, you can still do it.
No.
Well.
No, I don't want to anymore.
But also, we have a clip from towards the end of Citizen Kane in our spoiler bumper as well. So
it's true.
We really double dipped into this movie for sound bites.
Yep.
And content.
Good thing it ended up being released for Criterion.
Yeah, it really fit. I think we did that long before.
Yeah, I know. We just liked the movie.
Yeah. Well, it's a good movie.
It is.
Spoiler
worth
alert.
liking.
Yeah. Spoiler, it's one of the movies that's often considered the greatest movie of all time is good.
Yeah.
Shock.
Yeah.
But okay, other than that, how are you?
Pretty good, I suppose. How about yourself?
I'm good. I currently feel bad for spoiling your thing, but otherwise things are quite good.
I'm not quite over it either, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We can.
Well, we'll make it, I think.
I
have a feeling we'll get through. We'll do a whole episode and everything will be okay.
Yeah. It'll be as if nothing ever happened. As if I never thought of the joke at all. Anyway.
That's right. Okay.
All right. So shall we go ahead and get into News on the March?
Yes. Absolutely.
All right, here we go.
News on the March!
All right, so here we are in News on the March. More appropriately than we ever will be.
Yeah,
more
than it ever has been. Yeah.
But first up, Mike, you've got Alien Romulus to talk about, so go for it.
Yeah, cool. So this last weekend, my fiance and I went to go see Alien Romulus, and she has seen Alien and Aliens. I have seen all of them. And so, I was ready to check out a new Alien movie. Word of mouth had been strong.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it took place between Alien and Aliens, so I figured that you wouldn't have to see a whole lot of stuff to really keep up. And I think I ended up being right on that. I don't believe she was confused at all. I think it was a fun time at the movies. It was gory and scary and thrilling in a lot of ways. I think maybe it's a little too winky at the audience with some obvious callbacks and stuff, like characters saying lines that are just callbacks to other movies that are kind of lame.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, most of the movie is just really solid, and it feels like the direction is strong. You know, you feel like you're in solid hands. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, other than a couple script things and a little too winky at previous callbacks, I think it's a good time. But there is a part of me that is sad that Ridley Scott is not getting to finally do his third and final David-centered story that he started with Prometheus and then continued on in Covenant. And I don't know, I'm very interested in that story. I know a lot of people aren't, though. Like, even in some of the reviews I've seen of this movie or have listened to of this movie, people seem very, very grateful that it has nothing to do or nothing much to do with those prequels. And the little bit that it does have to do with the prequels, I hear people bitching about a lot. So that's kind of a bummer because I liked those prequels. But at the same time, I also like a classic alien thrill ride, you know?
Right.
This movie feels a lot like what Prey was to the Predator franchise.
Okay. Yeah.
Just like solid footing, very few missteps, if any, you know? Plays with the lore of the franchise in interesting and fun ways. There are really creative action sequences in this. Like, they do a lot of things with the existing lore without adding a whole lot of new stuff and getting convoluted with stuff the audiences don't want. They play it pretty safe, but it doesn't necessarily feel like they're not taking any chances either, because there's a third act that I think gets pretty wild and is like my favorite part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And does have a little bit of callback to the prequels, Prometheus and Alien Covenant. So
Gotcha.
If you don't like those movies, I don't think you're going to be burdened by them at all. Like, I think you can go into this movie and have like a great time. If you are indifferent to them, then I think the callbacks might even make the prequels even a little cooler. And then if you like the prequels, I think you'll appreciate what they did to try and give you a classic alien tale, and also let you know that the prequels very much do exist in this universe, and we are drawing homage from them frequently. So, yeah,
right.
that's kind of my overall thoughts on Alien Romulus.
Well, cool. I hope to see it soon. I don't know that I'll have time to get to theaters. It just kind of depends on how quickly it leaves theaters.
It's doing okay, I think. I mean, it really depends on how it does this coming weekend, like the second weekend drop. Will, I think, depend on how much legs this movie has, but I think it's had a strong start.
Yeah, I know many people who have seen it, and most of them have pretty much felt the same way that you have from what I've heard, just like varying degrees of enjoying it, but recognizing that it is sort of, like you said, that kind of almost return to roots, but with like a different twist, like a modern take.
Right. Like, you don't have to like enjoy hard sci-fi to like this the way I feel like you would maybe Prometheus, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we'll certainly talk about that because I agree with that. Yeah.
Like, I think you could show this to like a horror movie fan. So like, it's general audience pleasing, I think.
Yeah.
And that's probably where the franchise needs to be at this point in time, based on because like, I don't think Prometheus or Covenant bombed by any means, but like they didn't reach the heights that they should have for the budgets that they had. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So anyways, very solid alien movie. If you're into that kind of thing, I think you'll have a good time. But there are some like lame sequel callback things, like saying the line that we all know. It's like really famous, like the most famous line from the franchise, like a different character saying it that doesn't need to say it, kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get past that stuff, which a younger me probably wouldn't have, I think me as I am now in my like later 30s, I don't have the energy to get mad and hold that kind of grudge against that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's just, I've let smaller things deter my enjoyment of something. And I don't know, I just try to overlook those things now, even though I can recognize that the movie would be stronger without that kind of stuff. That need to like remind you that you're watching a franchise that you just paid money to see. You know, I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah. Is it there's no part of you that enjoyed those? Like, were there any that you were like, oh, neat, like that's cool? Or was it all just,
I mean, it's really not as bad as all that. I think it's just a couple lines here and there. One in particular, like there's a character that says Sigourney Weaver's famous line from Aliens during the big duel, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think that happens in Alien Covenant as well.
Yeah. So it's
that
like
line is repeated in there, so I can see what you mean by like seeing a bit too much.
Right. It's kind of like in Star Wars where it's like, okay, do they have to say I have a bad feeling about this in every Star Wars movie? Like, okay. That's fine, I guess. Yeah. But this one seems more in your face than that example. But anyways, all in all, Alien Romulus, pretty good time.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Good. So anyways, without further ado, I guess we should go ahead and start talking about the prequels that you just watched, I assume in preparation for Romulus, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Are you going to watch Alien before you?
Alien? No, I don't think so. I've seen it enough times.
Okay. It's the next one chronologically, though, so I was just going to ask.
Oh, yeah. No, I wasn't thinking about that.
I don't know. You don't really need to see it. I guess you've seen it enough times, but I would say that, like, the only ones you really, like, I guess you really don't need to see any of them. Romulus is pretty standalone. But anyways, yeah. I'm getting burdened down. What'd you think of Prometheus and Covenant?
Yeah, so yeah, I watched them to prep, primarily because I only saw Prometheus in theaters and haven't seen it since. I remembered almost nothing about it. Alien Covenant I never saw, so this was actually a first-time watch for me.
Yeah, and you watched them like back-to-back nights, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I watched them with the enthusiasm as if I were going to see Romulus the next day, but not. Or like really soon. But yeah, so Prometheus was a revisit, and it's one that I've been wanting to rewatch for a long time just because I remember enjoying it in theaters, and then I think the general opinion of that movie since then, and maybe just people not talking about it that much, and when I do hear stuff about it, I hear about it sort of in the frame of disappointment. I think that kind of seeped in a little bit, and I was like, well, it's probably just okay. Like maybe it's just okay, and I remember liking it, and maybe it's just not that good. So it's been one I wanted to revisit for that reason.
Yeah,
and in revisiting it, I remember exactly why I liked it in theaters, and I think appreciated it even more now than I did at the time. And yeah, like I was honestly surprised by how much it held up and how into it I was. Like I don't think I could pick out very many flaws, even that are like ones that like registered. Just because, to your point, it is much more hard sci-fi. I was surprised by how little action was in it.
Yeah, I think so were general audiences.
Yeah, I remembered more action being in it. So I think just like the hard sci-fi, all the themes and like the different big ideas that this movie has versus, something that I assume is Romulus might be a little bit more like, or Aliens is like, are the things that I really love in sci-fi. So for me, like watching it, I was just over the moon about it. And I struggled to understand like why the movie isn't more praised than it is.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you what I hear all the time.
You can.
And some of which I even agree with to a degree, but anyway, yeah. Keep going.
No. Yeah, you can tell. I'm good on Prometheus for now, but tell me.
Okay, this isn't really a spoiler. So, like, there are characters, like scientist characters, right, who are exploring a planet, and I think frequently they do dumb things that defy believability for a lot of people, like taking off your helmet when you shouldn't, reaching out and touching a strange creature that every instinct in you should tell you to not touch,
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the elements of the script that I see quoted a lot, saying that people wanted to like the movie, but that the human characters were too stupid to go on that journey with them and not be distracted by their stupidity, right? Like maybe like what I hear a lot is like people can feel the script writing needing them to be stupid, or like do dumb things for the sake of moving the plot along, kind of complaints. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But equally, what I would say is, and this is funny, I listened to a Slash Film Daily podcast recently where they talked about their overall kind of thoughts on the franchise, and all the different hosts kind of like weighed in on this. And there was a couple defenders of Prometheus on there. And I have always kind of agreed with this, and I kind of am glad they put it into words in a way that I really enjoyed, which is that, yeah, okay, maybe scientists should know better, but also Ridley Scott seems like a misanthrope and hates people, and people do stupid things. And just because you're a scientist doesn't make you smart. You know, it might make you smart about one specific thing. Right. Oftentimes, these people are not put in situations where they have been trained on how to deal with first contact alien species, I'm sure. You know what I mean? So, like, there are a number of ways you can play this off, but I think it ultimately boils down to, and I agree with this, Ridley Scott's opinion of people in general, humanity. I think he just hates them. I think this is true in a lot of his movies. And I think you're looking at a point of view rather than a glitch, you know, like in the movie. I think you're looking at like an intentional choice. And that may not work for everybody. But like I said, those issues to me are relatively small overall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they didn't bother me super much to begin with. But if someone does levy that complaint at me about Prometheus, about the human characters being too stupid or the scientists and all that, I think I'm gonna go with, yeah, but people are stupid.
Yeah, they are, and I think there's some sense, like in this sort of movie, and a lot of the Alien movies to me, of like a sort of an arrogance of man.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
mm-hmm.
Just kind of always, and people are always making like dumb decisions, these kind of movies, right? It's just like why would you go into a strange house in a horror film or something, you know?
Yeah.
I think to get into that too hard is a bit of bad faith. But to your point also, and maybe this kind of takes us into Alien Covenant as well. In Alien Covenant, it feels like the human qualities that the David from Prometheus, I guess the other one's name is Walter in Alien Covenant, but like so, David's human qualities. What's that?
I'm just like, I think, are we doing spoilers from here on out, or did you want to try to be vague still and then get into spoilers?
No, we can get into spoilers, I guess, because.
Well, real quick before we do that, hold your thought you're about to say. But what did you think of Covenant? I know you got your thoughts on Prometheus out there.
Oh, Covenant I thought was really good too. It's definitely lives somewhere more between Aliens and Prometheus in terms of a blend of something that's hard sci-fi and concerned with human themes and ideas more than action. Because this one certainly has more action, more sort of like gruesome, brutal kills.
Yeah.
And more suspense, but and I think that's probably where the movie is at its worst as well.
Interesting,
but
okay.
Not saying it's bad, just saying it's like the least interesting parts of the movie are like
I'm curious
some fight scenes.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to see what you end up thinking of Romulus because of that. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think the important thing maybe, because I'm sure if the movie is intending to be action and suspense like first, then
it might do it better.
It might do it might do it better, or it might be like, if that's the most interesting thing about the movie, then cool. But the ideas and themes are so interesting to me and throughout Prometheus and Covenant that when we're not doing that and talking about those things, I'm kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I've only seen Covenant once, but my memory of that was being completely enthralled whenever Michael Fassbender kisses himself, you know?
Sure.
Being like, what is happening? What is this ponderous movie that I'm watching right now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And versus, you know, when we have an action scene where two characters, like, you know, are engaged in hand-to-hand combat, throwing each other around like a, you know, feels like a bit more like a Marvel movie or something. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Anyway, so
let's end this fight and move on.
So spoilers from here on out, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that I feel like the human elements of David are a big part of the themes in Covenant, and ultimately are part of his downfall and part of what make him a bad person, right? This sort of like greed and revenge and curiosity and whatnot, and
pettiness.
Yeah, and they make it a point that the new version, Walter, is stripped of humanity, and they even say that like your version was too
wild,
like a human, too human-like, and so they made changes to me.
Yeah, probably smart.
And I think that lines up with just the not really like thinking very well of humans and their arrogance.
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's honestly, really, if we're taking a step back, what Prometheus and Covenant are about. The arrogance of humans, the vanity of humans, the undesirable qualities of it, right? I think that's very intentional. David is, by all intents and purposes, our main character through these two movies, right? We follow a couple of humans in both movies, but that's probably not wise to emotionally invest in humans in these movies.
No. No. But also I think like the importance we feel to our creator is something I found really interesting, especially in Prometheus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like, there's this sense that if we can find who created us, they'll give us all these answers and they'll talk to us and they'll be like, "Whoa, our creation, great, we love you."
Yeah, you made it. Look at you, getting all the way here. Yeah,
yeah. And in reality, the first time they encounter an engineer creator in Prometheus, like he immediately like rips David's head off.
Yeah,
and becomes hostile and violent towards them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I find that awesome.
Yeah, well, it's again the arrogance of humans, right? Because earlier in the movie, I think they even put it together. They find the black goo, as it's come to be known. Although, I won't say it here, but it may have a name going forward. Anyway.
Okay.
The black goo. Basically, it's like they were going to destroy us. They used it to create us. If we can assume the beginning of Prometheus is Earth, right? Then
right.
They used it to create us or some form of it, and then they're using some form of it to destroy us. But it got loose, and they never made it, right? Like the characters put that together in the movie, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And then, knowing this, they still wake this guy up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, and the plan in all of human arrogance is to be like, can you make me live longer? I'm getting old. Like.
Right.
And why would just like, when you spell it out like that, it's like, yeah, that's obviously what this series is about, is the arrogance of man, right? To go to your creator and ask for more. And even knowing that, like, they probably don't want to talk to you, like.
Right. And assuming that you're as important to the creator that.
Yeah. Assuming you weren't just like a first draft, that they've moved on to something better.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, exactly.
Or that they care, or what anything is. But that's the thing, is humans are inquisitive, but we're also extremely vain and self-centered. I don't think we can imagine the universe without us being like kind of the center of everything important about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our journey is looking at it like we're going to the stars to find our creators, but really what it is we're going where we're not welcome and inviting ourselves in and kind of assuming a lot. And it's funny because like in the deleted scenes of Prometheus, there's a longer conversation between the engineer and David, and he is translating. And basically it it amounts to they were going to wipe us out because we were arrogant and were unworthy, basically. They created us. We were terrible.
Yeah, I think they mentioned that we crucify.
Right. They sent us, I think
engineer.
in the script they called it a mother's child, which I don't know if that was an engineer or a child they took from Earth, educated, and then sent it back to Earth. But either way, they provided us a savior to teach us our ways and get us going the right path. And we crucified him, right? We about 2,000 years ago, about that time that they said in the movie that everything went wrong. Wonder what happened then. And then...
what's that alluding to?
Exactly. So that's all pretty cool. I understand why they would cut that out of the movie. It seems a little maybe on the nose for general audiences. Who knows? Maybe they were scared it would offend people. I don't know what they thought,
Yeah. Or just wanted to leave like more mystery.
Maybe, but I like
Sometimes
it.
that's good.
It's very cool. I've always enjoyed that about Prometheus. So I agree with some people that the execution gets a little wonky sometimes, but man, I enjoy the big swings of Prometheus and Alien Covenant, to be honest with you. I really wish that Ridley Scott would just get just one little movie to close it all in and tie it all together,
Yeah. Because we very much end with David flying somewhere else. I will say that like there's a slight disappointment that the woman from Prometheus dies sort of between movies, even though like I kind of understand. But
yeah,
I remember being
dark.
I remember being very hyped on the end of Prometheus of like, we're gonna go find our creator,
Yeah.
It seems sort of like we're gonna go after him. And I was hyped on that ending, and so whenever Covenant first starts, and it's like she died in the crash, and I was like, oh, bummer. I mean, turns out that's not exactly true, but
yeah, I was like, I did that, but it's honestly her fault for putting him back together.
Yeah.
She really should not have done that after the events of Prometheus.
Yeah. I just think like I found her very interesting, and like so it is a bit of a bummer that she's dead like the whole time and we don't ever get more of her, but what they do with it's cool enough.
Yeah, it was weird because I remember a sequel to Prometheus took a while. Alien Covenant took, I think, like 5 years to get made, 6 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, this may not even happen. I guess Prometheus just didn't make the money they wanted it to. And then Alien Covenant started being advertised. And then I was kind of like, oh, well, back to basics, And then I remember watching it in theaters and being like, oh man, this is very Prometheus-y, in a lot of ways. I remember being very sad in the theater about what happened to her, but also kind of like sad in that way though that feels right. It's like in the Planet of the Apes movies when you find out just like the character you were following all last movie just died off screen unceremoniously. There's something kind of dark in like a way that feels right to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If they do it right.
Yeah.
Or they make if they make the right like points with it, right? Or...
Maybe. I just feel like this franchise is pretty bleak. I think growing up on it, I remember I used to hate Alien 3 because it was too bleak, and I don't know. Now as I get older, the more I just kind of like bummer endings and bummer stories. They just feel more honest, more true to me. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe older than when you were a kid, but I've known you for a while, and I feel like
that's true. But when I was a kid, I remember very distinctly not liking Alien 3 because it made me sad. You know what I mean? Like, right. I used to hold it against the movie and tell myself I didn't like it. And now whenever I start feeling that coming up, I'm like, I kind of embrace the darkness of the story,
Yeah, this is a very different movie, but I used to not finish SLC Punk a lot as a kid.
Oh yeah, it's just a happy movie about a guy that parties and yells at people.
Yeah, guy is just a punk.
Yeah,
no
never
revelations.
Yeah,
no big changes. So yeah, I used to do that. So I know what you mean.
Yep. So anyways, anything else we want to say about Prometheus and Covenant?
No, I don't think so. I just think they're very good, and I am going to be slightly optimistic and say, never say never that we won't get this third installment. Hopefully, it's while, hopefully Ridley Scott can do it,
Yeah. I think if he gets some goodwill with Gladiator 2, if Gladiator 2's a hit, and the franchise is back into a better spot with general audiences after Romulus, maybe he'll get something. Who knows?
Yeah. Because, it took a long time for Blade Runner.
That's true. He didn't even direct that one, though, but it was still a banger.
Yeah, it's true. And if it's not him, hopefully it's somebody like, we get sort of a Blade Runner, Denis Villeneuve sort of combo happening with whatever sequel ends up happening. Like, I just feel like if in hindsight those movies have enough cult following, eventually someone will try to tap it for profit.
Right. Yeah.
Or quick buck.
Definitely.
But
cool.
Okay, yeah.
We move into our feature review for Citizen Kane, spy number 1104, starting now.
Lights! Give me a mic. Thank you. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Orson Welles. I'm speaking for the Mercury Theater, and what follows is supposed to advertise our first motion picture. Citizen Kane is the title, and we hope it can correctly be called a coming attraction. It's certainly coming to this theater, and I think our Mercury actors make it an attraction. I'd like you to meet them. Speaking of attractions, well, the chorus girls are certainly an attraction, but frankly, ladies and gentlemen, we're just showing you the chorus girls for purposes of ballyhoo. It's pretty nice ballyhoo. But here's some of our real Mercury people. This is the first time you've seen most of them on the screen. Hey, give Joe a little light. Thanks. Now smile for the folks, Joe. Smile. Joseph Cotton, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Joseph Cotton. I think you're going to see a lot of him. Here's Ruth Warwick, whom I know you love. Ruth. Look at the camera, Ruth. We caught Ruth with her hair up. And here's somebody you've all heard on the radio, so I don't have to tell you he's wonderful. Ray Collins. Dorothy Commongore is a name I'm going to repeat. Dorothy Commongore. I won't have to repeat it much longer. You'll be repeating it. And here's George Coulouris, who's a grand actor. I'll say that name again. George Coulouris. Watch it. Here comes Everett Sloane. Look out, Everett. Oops. Everett Sloane, ladies and gentlemen. He isn't necessarily a comedian. And here's one of the best in the world. Agnes Moorehead. I've said a lot of nice things, but Erskine Sanford deserves some more. Erskine Sanford. So does Paul. Paul Stewart, everybody. Citizen Kane is a modern American story about a man called Kane. Charles Foster Kane. I don't know how to tell you about him. There's so many things to say. I'll turn you over instead to the characters in the picture. As you'll see, they feel very strongly on the subject.
Charles Foster Kane is...
Sure, he started the war. But do you think if it hadn't been for Mr. Kane, the United States would have the Panama Canal?
Charles Foster Kane is nothing more or less than a communist.
Kane, governor. Listen, when the voters of this state and Mrs. Kane learn what I found out about Mr. Kane and a certain little blondie named Susan Alexander, he couldn't be elected dog catcher. I'm going to skin Mr. Charles Foster Kane alive.
I'm going to marry him next week at the White House.
Emily, I hear you've been stepping out with Charlie Kane.
Of course I love him. I gave him $60 million. Well, of course I love him. He's the richest man in America.
But all the girls say about him at first.
But you know, I can't help but admire him.
He's crazy.
He's wonderful.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what you'll think about Mr. Kane. I can't imagine. You see, I play the part myself. Well, Kane is a hero and a scoundrel, a no-account and a swell guy, a great lover, a great American citizen, and a dirty dog. It depends on who's talking about him. What's the real truth about Charles Foster Kane? I wish you'd come to this theater when Citizen Kane plays here and decide for yourself.
All right, so as always with our Criterion films, we will not be doing the spoiler-free section up front where we give our general thoughts and opinions like we do for our newer films. These films have typically been out. This poll was for 1940s movies, so this movie's been out for decades and decades. So you've had plenty of chances to go see the movie, but consider this your spoiler warning, your alert. Mm-hmm. If you haven't seen Citizen Kane, you don't want anything spoiled, pause the podcast right now, go watch the movie, come back and finish listening.
That's right. So, Citizen Kane, directed by Orson Welles, stars Orson Welles, Joseph Cotten, and Dorothy Cummingore. The IMDb synopsis says, following the death of publishing tycoon Charles Foster Kane, reporters scramble to uncover the meaning of his final utterance, Rosebud.
Yep.
That is
Beautiful.
The movie.
Yeah. Well, this was your choice, Mike. And
it was.
Technically, there is already a Citizen Kane review somewhere deep in our episode count, but it was before it was Criterion.
Deep in the bowels of our episode count.
Yeah, it was before it was Criterion. It was when you and former and future co-host Chris were not available, so I had like a guest on and we talked about it, gearing up for Mank. So my opinion is a bit documented, but it was also your choice. So why don't you go first and kick us off with your thoughts on Citizen Kane?
Yeah, so I've seen this movie, I don't even know how many times. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah, same.
Watched it a couple times, like on my own, and then a few times in school. A couple times outside of school again. So I've seen it, I don't know, I want to say like maybe 9 times. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But each time I do not enjoy it any less. I probably enjoy it more. It's, for lack of a better word or phrase, like worth the hype. You know what I mean? Like, I think it lives up to the hype. Now, I think whenever you give any movie the title of like greatest movie of all time, like many lists have done for this movie,
mm-hmm.
it does it a favor, and then it also doesn't. Because you're going to have one of two reactions. If people watch it and they're like, that's great. Or 2, they watch it and say, that was not the best movie ever.
Yeah. Therefore, it's underwhelming.
Right. Therefore, I'm disappointed. Right. And that's the framing device for this movie a lot. And I think that's kind of a bummer, because greatest movie of all time, like they're.
Yeah, I think it's a dumb title to bestow upon anything, but I understand that if you're making great movie lists, inevitably something has to be number one.
Yeah, true. But that said, I completely get it, right? The camera angles, the shooting style of this movie, it still feels very modern in so many ways. So many modern techniques implemented here, that if you look at the peers that were movies being made in the 40s at this time, man, it just didn't look like this, did not feel like this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very obvious when watching it. I think it's quite extraordinarily shot. There are big sequences where Orson Welles seems to just like ignore the rules of filmmaking and just kind of does whatever he wants. And I'm sure, obviously, his DP helped out with that quite a bit. He's given many props to him over the years. His name escapes me, but I'll think of it in just a second.
Greg Toland.
Toland, thank you very much. I knew the last name, but I didn't know the first. But
yeah.
His work here, I don't think, can be understated. I think this movie is so well shot, so just like beautiful looking. I watched the Criterion 4K transfer on a disc, and my God, does this movie look so good.
Yeah. Agreed.
Just from like a technical craft point of view, this is a very exceptionally made movie. I think the script is tight. And I think the thing about it is it rings true. It's not ridiculous. There's no gunfights. There's no car chases. There's no dramatic movie tropes like that. It's a drama about a man, a complicated man, but one we can relate to, one we understand. even if we don't always condone everything he's doing, you know? I don't know. I just think it's a fascinating movie, and I understand why it's commonly regarded as one of the best movies ever made. I think it's very good. Probably still not in like my personal top favorite movies, like maybe on like a top 50 list, sure, you know.
Yeah.
But it is a well crafted example of a movie from the 40s, right? Of an exceptionally made one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though your thoughts have been documented in another episode, why don't you do audiences a favor here in this episode and give us a brief summarization of your relationship with this movie and so on.
Yeah. My story is very similar to yours, partially because we went to film school together. So
yeah, that's true.
You know,
and lived in the same place when I think we both watched it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'd each seen it on our own prior to watching it together ever. So yeah, it's a pretty similar story, you know. Definitely came at it from the idea that it was the greatest movie ever. Like, you know, I think I saw it as number one on several lists, and there's even the magazine Empire Records had done 100 greatest films of all time, and I believe it ranked number one on that list. I could be wrong, but it was high up there. But I was coming at it from like, yeah, this is the greatest movie. And I think when I was younger, I probably disagreed harder on that point. You know, not to an extent that I never liked it, because I've always liked it. I've always thought it's really good and really well shot, really interesting. Mm-hmm. My appreciation only goes up for it as I acquire higher quality transfers of it and watch it again, because I've now have it on Blu-ray or now have it on 4K disc. This is my second time to watch the 4K transfer, and you're correct, it looks great. As far as my thoughts on the movie, like I think it's really, really perfect in my opinion. And while there may be some flaws from a technical standpoint, I think you kind of have to step back and view it from the lens of how much they're pioneering here, and realize that like while you're pioneering stuff, it's not going to be perfect, right? Sure. Like are some of the shots where they're transitioning from a real shot to a miniature flawless? No, I don't think so. You know, some of the prosthetics kind of show a little bit, in my opinion, when they age and
probably because you're watching it in 4K.
Yeah, probably. Probably, but I think like film is 6K resolution, generally speaking, so people would have always been seeing it in high resolution, assuming the film print was held up to
only if you're seeing a film print in theaters.
Yeah. Well, for decades people were, right?
Yeah.
Although I'm sure over time they degraded and whatnot. But anyways, like there are little like tiny technical flaws that I think are just the product of early film, right? But if you kind of let those go and understand that those are just sort of growing pains, I think this movie is insanely perfect. I think it's incredible from like a story point, as you said, the way that it's shot from an acting perspective. Every performance is interesting and really good. I often get lost in terms of what people are talking about because I'm just in awe of like the cinematography. I don't know if that ever happens to you, but there are scenes that I'm watching the lighting and the framing and the blocking and staging. Yeah. As much as anything else. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so rewatchable for me is that sometimes there's a conversation I don't remember very well because last time I watched it, I was just fascinated by the blocking and composition
or the
of a
shadows
scene, right?
over someone's face or something. Yeah.
So there's just there's so many layers to it, and I think ultimately the story also ends up being a bit timeless. You know, like to me, I think when I watched it when I did the episode with a guest in prep for Mank, was the first time I'd watched it in a while, and it was post 2020, so like it was a punch in the face whenever they hold up the
newspapers,
the newspaper that says voter fraud.
Yeah. Yeah, they had like two. They had like Kane wins, and then like another one. It's like voter fraud at the polls or whatever. Yeah,
yeah.
My fiance and I commented on that last night when watching it. Where it's like, as true as it ever was, I guess.
Yeah. That just like hits you like a punch in the face, I think now, and just shows how relevant this story can be. And this isn't just some washed up 40s film that hasn't aged or that is like hokey or something. Like I think it holds up really, really well too, on top of all of its I keep saying perfect, and like I mean it. It's not my favorite movie by any means. It didn't make my top 10 when we did our best of list. It probably never will, but I do think it's perfect.
Yeah, I think those two things can both be true, right?
Yeah. I think it's a great movie, probably one of the greatest ever made, for reasons beyond just like how the movie is as a film when you sit down and watch it for the 2 hours that you're watching it, right? So
absolutely. So I was, kind of browsing through YouTube before we started recording, just kind of looking, see what YouTube was saying about Citizen Kane. And there were some videos from the American Film Institute, AFI. I say the full name so that you know that I'm not talking about the band.
I would love to watch them talk about Citizen Kane.
I would love to see AFI, the band, sit down to interview Martin Scorsese about Citizen Kane.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway, Scorsese talks about how Welles was really the first to ditch the like hidden camera idea in American cinema, right? This idea that the camera just had to observe and document and it'd be invisible by all.
Right. Like sometimes it's the idea of like, if you notice the camera, that's bad. You don't want to be noticing. And then, this spits in the face of that idea.
Right. Whereas, when making this movie, Welles and his DP were basically just like, to hell with that. We're going to do all kinds of stuff, right? We're going to, dig a hole in the ground and put the camera real low. We're going to constantly remind you of all these shots and bring attention to the idea that this is a shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Callback shots.
Right. Exactly. So anyways, I just think it's interesting that Welles kind of really, it wasn't just Welles. It was also his DP probably finally getting to cut loose with a first time movie director that didn't know to tell him no,
Yeah.
So anyways, I just think it's really fascinating. And in this movie, that's true, right? Like you're seeing shots where you can see the ceiling. Like they had to build sets with ceilings sometimes because this movie was just the camera placement, right? And I think that really helps. Like to what you were saying earlier, the blocking, right? Like there are so many scenes in this movie where people are just standing in a room together and then someone, like they're just in the background and there's a shadow over the top half of their body.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see their face and they're talking, but they're against a background that like you could see a little bit more of that, but they're silhouetted. So that like it adds this nice artistry about it, even though it's really bizarre. And I whenever you're watching it, that could be distracting. Yeah. Right? Like that could be distracting. The idea that people are walking in and out of shadows and not everyone's faces are lit and people looking at each other and having two conversations and you can't see them. You just see like their hands in their pockets and like their jackets and stuff, And then they'll walk into frame and walk into the light like 90 seconds, 2 minutes into a shot.
Yeah.
And you're like, what were they doing? Why would they do that? But it worked. They just had confidence that they knew what they were doing and that it would be interesting and not distracting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a way that you could so easily do that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they do ever. There's never like a misstep. Everything's always in focus that needs to be. Everything's in the shadow that needs to be. The sets are cleverly designed to give you a further depth of field so that everything can remain in focus. Like the sets are an illusion sometimes to make it feel like they're further away, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if this is from the same interview, but I've seen a clip of Martin Scorsese, and I saw it out of context for like reasons that are way too detailed and in the weeds to go into. But
Okay.
I think he's either talking about Orson Welles or John Ford, I think. And he's talking about how there's this sense that you get when you're watching the film that like every angle the camera is placed exactly in the right place constantly.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's no other place the camera could be.
Right.
For that scene, for that moment. And maybe he was talking, maybe it's the same interview, maybe not, but
maybe. I didn't see that part of it.
It applies to this movie, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think so. I think it's almost like indisputable, I would say.
Yeah. Like I understand to an extent people that I've heard say that the movie's boring or uninteresting, you know. But if anybody came at me saying it's not that well shot, like it looks okay,
yeah,
I would passionately disagree.
Right. Right. Yeah, my fiance was she just saw this for the first time last night, and she really liked it. And she said she was telling her coworker at work today that she saw it, and he was like, "What's that?" And she's like, "You know, like it's commonly regarded as like the gold standard for movies, like in like a lot of lists and stuff like that. It's often referred, like other things are referred to as the Citizen Kane of whatever."
Yeah.
To show that like their greatness in that in their respective field, you know. And he was like, "Oh, cool." But anyways, that was funny and depressing.
Sure, yeah. Well,
but,
gone are the days of like I think Family Guy has a Citizen Kane joke too, and I doubt many new shows will be dropping Citizen Kane references, but
no,
at least like vocal ones where like the reference itself is supposed to be funny and people are supposed to know what it is. Might be visual references or whatever. But before we move too far off, like shots and stuff that kind of blow your mind and are just sort of unbelievable when they're happening. The two that I feel the way that like you're talking about is it's the one where he's like signing away a bunch of stuff to the guy whose name I can't remember, who comes to like and takes them away from his parents.
Mm-hmm.
Thatcher.
He's out the window.
His name. Yeah. No. There's giant windows behind them, and he's like an older man at this point, not when he's a boy. Oh. And he's like signing away stuff to him, and Kane is walking. He's like up by the table by them, and then there's some windows, and then he walks back to the windows, and you realize the windows are like 4 times as tall as him, and the bottom of the windowsill is like a foot above his head.
Yeah.
But the combo of like the distortion of the wide angle lens and the deep focus photography where like everything's in focus make it seem a lot closer and make them seem like kind of normalish windows.
Right.
But that's one of the, like, he does this trick again when he's talking to his opera singer wife. Mm-hmm. And there's
singer
a fireplace.
In quotation marks.
Yes. Singer. Which that's really funny, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Like even before they call it out. But before they call it out, like whenever the headline first pops up and it's like singer in quotation, that makes me laugh out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's so like unnecessarily catty.
Yeah. And it like drives him crazy for years later.
Yeah.
Trying to like it's almost like when you watch that video of like Obama making jokes about Trump from like years and years ago. And,
right.
And you could just see Trump seething in the audience. And then in retrospect, you're like, man, that's why he ran for president.
Oh, yeah. Are you talking about, is it Seth Meyers at like the...
No, it's like Obama
dinner?
Making fun of him at the dinner.
Okay. I've seen the Seth Meyers one. I haven't seen the Obama
videos of like
one.
Trump in the audience and Obama's making fun of him about the birth certificate thing. And Trump's like trying to be a good sport in the audience. And you can tell he's just like seething that Obama's making a joke about him.
Yeah. As we pointed out, that's not the only Trumpian quality.
No.
to Charles Foster Kane.
No.
But yeah, okay, so yeah, he's with his in quote singer wife, and she's doing a puzzle at the table, and he's at the table, and the fireplace is behind him, and then like he walks back into the fireplace, and you realize like it dwarfs him.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, it's huge, and
you can't like that perspective isn't really there when he's up close to the table talking. You don't quite realize it's as big as it is until he walks back there. So
yeah,
it's a technique he uses a couple times, but like it's one of those things that, like I said, like I find myself watching more than listening in those moments, and like one of those elements that you find on repeat viewings or that you notice more, and one of the things that give the scenes from like a visual compositional standpoint so many layers. And he's always doing stuff also, like that.
It gives like this vast emptiness to their like where they're living, in the distance between them. Sometimes like you think like it shouldn't be that much, like he's just right over there, but then you're like, oh god, he's like a million years away. You have to like yell to hear each other.
Yeah. I like the scene where she comes in and sits down at the chair. Or he sits in the chair and she's at the fireplace like doing a puzzle like in the fireplace. And they have to like keep repeating what they're saying because they're just so far apart and it's so cavernous. Yeah, that's really funny. It's a surprisingly funny movie.
It is. There's a lot of humor in it. And also that's like there's also like a lot of creativity involved too. Like not just with the shots like we were talking about earlier, but like the movie magic, how it all happens, right? Like especially like in the ways you don't expect. Like for example, the audience like watching Kane when he's giving his speech.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know this already, but it's just like a still photograph with a bunch of holes punched in it, and they move a light around to give the illusion of like audience members like squirming around in the seat. And I never knew that. And going back and looking at that scene, knowing that, it still looks great. Like I don't understand how they knew that would look good or it would work, but it somehow did. You know, just like just a little bit of movement. Just it looks like little arms and heads squiggling around, even though none of the people in the photograph are actually moving. It's just really crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those like even if you're watching for it, it's kind of hard to see.
Yeah, it still looks convincing and good. Like, I would never in a million years have thought that. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's the product of I think something we'll never see and probably rarely saw outside of this. Because I think Citizen Kane was not a success when it came out, in terms of like box office.
Right.
But there's the quote from Orson Welles, something like, "Movie studio is the greatest toy you could have, or like a greatest like toy factory or something like that." Right. But they kind of just gave him like carte blanche, right, to just do whatever he wanted. And then he got to play around and experiment so much. And, that's how they pioneered so many things, right? But like being able to just play and figure stuff out. Like I would love to see
the wiggle room to play around and experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to see the things they tried that didn't work,
Yeah.
That when they got when they got the footage developed and got it back and we're like, okay, well, that's not convincing. Like I want to see the methods they tried.
Yeah. The trial and error.
Work out, for making that audience shot work.
Yeah.
And
does
that's
it make
one
you want to go back and watch Mank again?
Not particularly.
Yeah. I want to watch Mank again. I want to like that movie.
Yeah. I think if I think if Mank were a bit more like on the making of it or about Orson Welles more, like I might find it more interesting, but it's a bit about a part that I'm less interested in. It's not as much of, I don't know, to the Alien Romulus stuff. It's not calling out enough for the Citizen Kane fans for me to enjoy it on that level.
Need more of that Citizen Kane fan service.
Yeah.
Maybe if he would have repeated a famous Citizen Kane quote.
Yeah.
During the movie. Yeah.
Rosebud, I guess, is maybe like the most famous.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most famous Citizen Kane quote, but...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyways, in terms of other like really cool things that, like from a technique standpoint, I love the callback to the opera shots where like the first time we see it from the front of her getting ready, and the curtain coming up and her starting to sing, and we pan up, which is another really cool inventive shot for the time, right?
Yeah, up and up and up. Yeah,
up and up with the sort of invisible cuts and miniatures and stuff, which is, not the most convincing. I think that's one of the ones where I think you can see the seams, so to speak. But
sure.
The inventiveness of it is still cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's true of most miniatures, right? Like,
most.
And in my opinion, like, I don't know, like there are some miniatures that when I find out they're miniatures, I'm like, oh, of course, like there's like that scene with like the 18-wheeler and the Batmobile in The Dark Knight where the 18-wheeler does that big flip.
Yeah.
Apparently that was all miniatures, like a miniature city street and a miniature 18-wheeler, which I didn't know.
I didn't know till just this moment. That's incredible.
Yeah. The car in Aliens that they used to drive into the place, that was a miniature.
Okay. See, I know like a lot of Blade Runner's establishing shots were miniatures.
Yeah. So, and usually I think you can tell, not always.
I think we're better at it these days.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, like Black Narcissus, you can tell it's a miniature, but that doesn't make it not incredible,
Right. Or, like King Kong.
Right.
And it's claymation, the original.
Right.
That is. And quite often I don't think we've perfected like CG animals in most things, right?
Yeah. They still don't move right.
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily docking the movie. It's just one of those things where like you can see the seams, but you have to kind of go with the flow, know that it's the time that it was, and still appreciate it for going for it, even if they haven't quite perfected.
Right.
But then I enjoy that it's the second time that we come back and we see it from behind and are a bit more in her shoes. I like. It's cool to see. I can't think of many other contemporaries that were making me feel like the camera is doing things so intentionally to make me like put me in the character's shoes this time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well crafted. Also, I think we'd be remiss if we did not mention the great supporting cast in this movie. Most notably to me, Joseph Cotton, who
certainly the most famous
great.
Other than Wells.
Yeah. This is also notably not the only movie these two acted in together. I'm sure they did more, but like Third Man,
Mm-hmm.
Another great movie. One that I probably like better than this one but maybe not. I don't know.
Ooh. It's a not for me, but I do really like Third Man.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to see Third Man more. I've seen this movie so many times that it feels like this movie has an unfair disadvantage.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because this one just gets better every time I watch it, and so...
Yeah, but also Third Man's a little more plot-heavy than... This movie's more of like a... it's chronicling a life, but there's not any villains, there's not any twists,
Right, yeah. It's a bit more character study.
Right.
I appreciate, like, the chronology of this movie, the way it, jumps back and forth in time and kind of handles all that, and the way when it chooses to reveal things to us. Feels really
like
well
you see
thought
like young, strapping, attractive Charles Foster Kane, and then shortly after you see him with like a mustache and like the receding hairline, and then he's back to young, strapping, Charles Foster Kane for a few more minutes. So it's like the movie was like really confident in its pacing and in its structure to where it can play around with that kind of stuff in a way that a lot of movies just were not doing at this time.
Yeah. I think it's a really complex structure.
Yeah.
Like if I try to like think about it too much, I get like kind of like wrapped up.
Well, that's why the Rosebud element of it all is such a smart script writing decision.
Yeah.
Because if it's just a big sprawling movie about a guy's life, it might seem unfocused, but with the added element of this device that we're seeking out, it gives us an excuse to dive into these things that might seem disparate but ultimately paint a portrait of a man, and it kind of sneakily does that for you. I think the device of Rosebud is actually probably the smartest thing about this movie, like script wise, because it takes this unruly idea of trying to capture a man's life and distills it down into a simple objective. We're going to find out about this man's life in the quest to search for the meaning of this word, and that gives us the mission instead of just being like, man, that's going to take a long time. Okay, here we go. Unfocused.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
I often forget about the Rosebud search, like when we're in scenes, Right.
And then the reporter will come back in and be like, what about Rosebud?
You're like, oh yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, that's what this guy's all about. I was interested in him running for office,
Yeah. Yeah, the scenes are just as good, and then you have that other layer that comes back, and you're like, all right, yes, we're on the search.
That's right, we got to be on the lookout for that Rosebud thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I bet everyone who knows what this movie is knows what Rosebud is. Like, probably. I wonder if there's anyone watching this for the first time now who, like, doesn't know what Rosebud is and is like, whoa, at the end,
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah. I'd be surprised, like, because, I mean, part of the revelation of it being his sled is it's not very whoa.
Right. Well, yeah, that's true.
It's
like, oh, it makes complete sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and
do you take it as
so
he just really
there.
liked that sled, or did he dismiss a different life altogether?
Well, I think that sled just represents the moment that he. Yeah. Okay. You know.
Yeah. I was just kidding. It was a joke.
Yeah. He just loves that sled. Like,
yeah. He just really liked that sled in particular.
Yeah. I did pick up this time something that I don't think I've ever put together, and if I did, I forgot about it. But there's a scene where he talks about how he's going to go to a warehouse and like go through his mother's things. And I've never really thought about the fact that he could be going to search for Rosebud.
Yeah. You never thought about that?
No, I never did. At least not that I recall.
I don't know if I always did every time I saw it, but I've definitely thought about that before. And I think that's how I interpret that scene is you don't know what he's looking for at the beginning, but in retrospect and in watching, watching it again, I mean, you can totally be like, oh yeah, he's looking for something to scratch that itch of a family life, that life that back when his parents wanted him, back when things were simple.
Yeah. And I think there's like the script is so good and the character study's so good. So I like seeing how that has manifested into this obsession with collecting statues and collecting things, it's like anytime he encounters a thing that he likes, he's like, well, that's mine now. I'll buy that.
Yep.
Like there's not really any purpose to it, but it's almost like he's like never going to let anything that he kind of likes like slip from nothing will be taken away, And I find that very heartbreaking.
Yeah. I mean, it is a sad story. It's not like tearjerker sad, but like when you really dissect the man, I mean, it is sad. Like the dude I think he just wanted to be loved, but didn't know how to go about it,
Yeah.
He wanted someone to love him unconditionally, and no one throughout his life ever would.
Right. And I think it's quite easy to dislike a character who's very wealthy and kind of did nothing to come into the wealth. And there are parts
he literally
of the movie
did
that I
nothing.
dislike
He just sort of fell into it.
Yeah. Somehow his parents came in contact with this banker, and the banker decided that kid should have a better life for...
Yeah, I don't understand it, but okay.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be very, 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 very easy to dislike him.
Sure.
And at times you do, right? Like I do think...
Yeah, I mean, I don't not dislike him, but also I never don't feel for the man to some degree. like, he's a flawed man, but he's also, I don't know.
Yeah, like where does him doing what he does with like the building the opera and forcing her to sing opera, even though she's not enjoying it and clearly like embarrassing herself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the root of that, in your opinion? Do you have an answer?
I don't know that we could. It's like a 1-for-1 tying it back to the. I don't know if that could be tied to Rosebud per se, maybe, but I take it as he's a man that is very proud of what he's earned and has gotten so used to being respected that he's going to manufacture the respect. Like, even if he can't get them, like the singer in quotation marks, whenever the scandal broke out, being the first thing that they knew about her, tainting everyone's point of view of his decisions, who he spends his time with, who he would invest his time into, right? It almost feels like, I will make them see you as great. And even if they don't, I'm never going to let up for a moment that I don't think you're great, because they can't see me falter like that, right? Like, it's almost like it would embarrass me to admit that you're not a true singer. So I would rather, like, you know what I mean? Like, that it's all about how it affects him and how he will be seen to the public, right? So it's almost like if he can vindicate himself and make her a singer, then retroactively everyone will be like, well, I mean, we were wrong.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? We were laughing at her, but he was right.
Yeah, make the quotation marks look stupid in hindsight.
Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess it's like and I like that.
That's what
idea
I'm saying.
This
is his moment where, you know, this is the moment where Trump decides to run for president, right? This is the moment where, like, he doubles down on something because he doesn't want to be made a fool of.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It just builds an entire opera house purely like based on a
massive waste of money.
Couple of quotation marks.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All right. What else do we want to talk about with Citizen Kane?
I don't know. I'm kind of running out of like specific
points.
We've kind of hit on all this stuff.
It's like there's nothing we're gonna say that like a bunch of documentaries covering the making of this thing. You know, like it's such a well-established movie that everyone knows about that it feels like once we give our honest takes and our honest opinions of the man and the character study of it all, it's just not a whole lot more to do, you know?
Yeah. And I know that there's the sort of infamous, like, he was basing this off of, is it William Randolph Hearst?
Yes.
The actual, like, newspaper guy, and there was the whole legal battle thing and whatnot, and, like...
And then the true meaning of what Rosebud was in real life.
Yeah. So I think that there's some historical stuff to touch on, but for me, I never think about that, you know?
Nah.
And I think...
Because, I don't know, the movie is a fiction. Like, there's some stuff that it's inspired by, but I don't know. You know what I mean? Maybe it would... Like, for people at the time who knew who Hearst was, maybe it paints the movie in a whole different brush, but I don't know. I'm not super interested in trying to pick out the biography elements of this, you know?
Yeah.
The biographical, excuse me.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't really hold any weight in terms of my opinion of the movie or my enjoyment of it, or... Like, there's nothing I pull from it that I'm like, you see, he was actually kind of making fun of this other guy.
Mm-hmm.
It stands on its own. And I guess if anything seems like sort of like dated and unbelievable about it, it's the fact that a simple marital affair will ruin your chances of being president.
Yeah.
As we've moved past that point.
Yeah. Long gone are those days.
Yeah. Used to be very simple for people to disqualify disqualify you.
Yeah, remember when that one guy, I forget his name, just made a weird noise?
Oh, the
like in a
BR
crowd
guy?
Yeah, he was like,
Howard
Howard
Dean.
like,
Howard Dean, I believe is his
that's
name,
it.
if anyone wants to look that up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wild. Like, just ended his entire momentum, like, instantly.
Being slightly too excited.
Yeah.
That you won a primary. That an entire state said, we prefer you the most. And you get a little too excited and make a noise, and you're suddenly not presidential material.
No one wants you. Yeah, no one wants you to be in politics anymore. Anyway, wild stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that does the review for Citizen Kane, right?
Yeah, I think I'm good. I'm sure I'll think of something later that I regret that we didn't talk about, but that is the nature of
But good thing we have a
podcasts.
companion old review episode that you got in the can years ago.
Yeah.
So
I
if you
probably
want
forgot
more-
to talk about the same stuff.
Yeah.
But okay,
Okay.
you ready
Yeah.
to move on to our poll for our next film?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was our 1940s. We've been doing a thing where we've been picking a movie from the Criterion Collection from each decade. We've been going a reverse chronological. The paper was called The Chronicle. I think that's in Citizen Kane. That's what just happened. But reverse chronological order. So we started with the 2020s, been working our way back. So after 1940s, we're on to the 1930s. I believe I went first last time. So Mike, what's your first pick?
All right. So my
1930s.
first pick is going to be a film called The Awful Truth, starring
Oh,
Cary
boy.
Grant and Irene Dune. I'm not really sure. I never
I
knew
would
how to
say-
say her last name.
I always
The
say
Awful-
Dunna,
Dunna.
but
Yeah.
it could just be done.
Don Draper says it once in Mad Men, but I forgot how he said it. Anyways,
But
it's directed
now you must
by-
rewatch the whole series.
yeah, no, I guess I should. It's directed by Leo McCreary, and I've seen this once before in college in my days when I was watching a lot of Cary Grant movies. I remember liking it. It has a lot of heart. So, yeah, The Awful Truth. I would like to watch it again one day.
I've never seen this one, despite, I believe, owning it. So,
well,
I tend to just grab. Yeah, I do own it. I see it on the shelf. I tend to just grab the Cary Grant Criterions because
because you can't go wrong.
I don't think I've seen a Cary Grant movie I don't like.
Okay.
Although I could be corrected.
I bet you could find one if you really tried.
Yeah, he's done a lot of movies, but I feel like the ones that have survived enough for me to hear about and see are probably the good ones.
Yeah.
So it's probably like a survivorship bias sort of thing.
Sure.
I'm like, Cary Grant never made a bad movie. It's because no one talks about
Because
his
all the
bad
other
movies.
his movies are not able to be found very easily.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I'd be excited about Awful Truth. I will go with, if you're ready for me to make a choice.
I am.
Okay, I'm going to go with another sort of screwball comedy, one that I really like a lot. I've only seen a handful of times, but I've seen it multiple times. But it's Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. It Happened One Night.
Okay.
Which is
All right.
one of
probably
my
win.
favorites. It could be, unless we pick other bigger things. I will say that in the 1930s, the films I want to watch the most are all like pretty big movies.
Yeah, I figured this would be. I figured we get some rom-com, maybe some screwball.
Yeah, those
I
are
figured.
some of my favorite movies. So it's hard to not pick them.
I know that. Yeah.
But okay.
Are you ready for my second one?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So my second film from the 1930s is The Scarlet Empress, starring Marlene Dietrich. It's a movie I've never seen. Directed by Joseph von Sternberg. I've seen, is it Shanghai Express?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that one, which was made 2 years apart from this one. But I have not seen Scarlet Empress. Yeah, 2 years before Scarlet Empress. So I've seen that one. So I would like to see this one too. So yeah. That's my number 2.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's another one I haven't seen, so it'd be a first time watch for me.
Yeah, and it's kind of a big movie. All right, I think so. It's like one of the bigger ones from the 30s I haven't seen.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know.
Hard to know.
I know I've heard of it. But I don't know what it's about. I have like no expectations. I couldn't tell you like a quote from it or anything.
Yeah.
But
me neither.
Well. All right. So I'm going to go with, since It Happened One Night was a big one, I'll go with a little bit smaller one. A film that I've only seen once that I would like to watch again. And that is, I guess it's called Vampire or Vampire.
Ah, yeah.
The Carl Theodor Dreyer film. I believe it's a silent film. Would be our first silent film in this run through the decades. Which makes sense because they started doing the old sound pictures in the 30s.
I bet next week it'll be a silent film.
Yeah, you can put money on it. I think.
Yeah. Or I guess week after when we get to the 20s, whatever. Anyway.
yeah. Unless we pick The Jazz Singer, but I don't think that's Criterion actually.
No.
But yeah,
and I don't want to watch that movie again.
I've never seen it. And
you've never seen it?
Not much. I don't think so.
Oh. I thought we saw it in class together. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to watch it again. But I will if it's on Criterion and you choose it.
I won't. Don't worry.
Okay.
But yeah, a vampire. A little horror film. Get in the mood for October, which is in some ways right around the corner.
When you think about it.
Yeah. But okay, that poll will be on Twitter/X at Casual Cinecast. Go follow us there. Go
Link
vote
in the show
poll.
Notes.
Link in the show notes, yes. All the usual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, Mike, are we done with this episode?
Yeah, I think we're done. Go ahead.
All right. Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say our next episode, but you go ahead. I'll do that next.
Okay. Well, as usual, thank you, listeners, so much for listening. As always, thanks, Jake Wagner Russell, for our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, go to soundcloud.com/bobscotch.
Yeah. Most episodes, I don't forget the order of things. But sometimes I do. Anyway.
Mostly.
Our next episode, aliens, yes. Our next episode will probably be the winner of that poll we just talked about for Criterion Collection 1930s. So, yay.
Yeah. It's probably going to be It Happened One Night.
Probably.
I don't think we picked anything bigger, but
no.
Until then, Mike, talk to you later.
See you next time.
Bye.